All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Gonna wait for a confirmation. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Rodriguez. I'm an SDK engineer at Okta, currently based in Toronto, Canada. And for over 2 years now, I have been working on the developer experience team, building the Okta SDKs for the .NET community. During my time on this team, I discovered that building libraries for other developers can be super challenging, but at the same time rewarding. There are so many aspects that you should take into account that not necessarily involve writing code. If you want other developers to enjoy your library while using it, it is not enough to provide them with a functional product that meets their needs. You also have to provide them with a smooth experience at every stage of their application's development. Today, I want to share with you some essential tips that you should consider if you're building libraries for other developers. These tips will help you to improve your product and also make you a better developer. So let's get started. The tip number one is consider exposing your library in a public repository. The benefits of open source are so many that they could be definitely a separate talk. There's no wonder this is the approach that many companies are following today with their products. But I know that this might not always be possible. There might be a lot of different reasons or company policies that will prevent you from doing this. If this is your case, maybe you can explore other options, such as exposing your project internally to other teams in your organization. The important point here is that you can gather feedback from others, especially the ones that are using your library. But let's review the reasons why you, as a developer and project maintainer, should consider going open source. In my opinion, the biggest benefit of open sourcing your library is that this decision will help you to make your product better thanks to the feedback that you will eventually collect from others. How many times do you find the answers to your questions by looking at others' code or debugging your code? Or how many times have you learned or found a better way to solve a problem by looking at other solutions? I'm pretty sure that the answer is uncountable times. We do that every day. Developers really appreciate to have the opportunity of being able to review the source code. By opening your code to the world, you are giving others the opportunity to understand your library better and also to find bugs and to contribute with other points of view or maybe features ideas. Feedback is fundamental to keep your product evolving. But receiving and giving feedback are skills that are not easy for everyone to develop. And you, as a project maintainer, should make it as easy as possible for other people to provide useful feedback. How? Well, by setting up contribution guidelines where you can inform others of your process and expectations. For example, if someone is reporting a bug, what information should be provided? I bet that you will at least need clear steps to reproduce it, the version where the issue was found out, or platform and environment details, plus any additional information that will save you time and will help you to quickly identify what the problem is. For feature request, I assume that you will spec the details of what scenarios the new feature will solve, so you can analyze them, the impact, and define the priority. For pull requests, what coding standards should contributors follow? What about testing? You should document all your expectation in a contributing guide, so contributors can verify the appropriate way to provide feedback and contribute to your project in advance. You can start simple and iterate it over time as your project evolves. In addition of making your product better, Exposing your library will help you to train a set of skills that will eventually make you a better developer. You just have to have an open mind and be willing to take constructive criticism to keep improving. As you can realize, open source is fundamental for constant feedback, but you just have to have an open mind and be mindful of providing and promoting a safe space for everyone to contribute, to feel welcome. That's why my tip number 2 is create and enforce a healthy and constructive community. This is one of my favorite tips because it is not only applicable to software communities, but also to any society. As a member of any community, we should always promote positive social change because by doing this, we are also contributing to making the world a better place for everyone. But let's go back to software. If you already have a project in a public repository, make sure you're fostering a positive environment for everyone. There are a few things that you can do to achieve this. For example, creating a code of conduct that clearly describes which actions or comments are appropriate and which are not. Of course, this won't prevent people from being disrespectful, but a code of conduct will give you the authority to ban people from the community if they are violating the rules. There are many examples of code of conducts available on the internet, so you have to do your research and choose the one that you feel more comfortable with. Take into account that you as the project maintainer are responsible for fostering and enforcing it. And also make sure it is available, it is accessible for everyone, maybe from your repository. Another important thing you should do to contribute to a positive community is being responsive. I know that we all live busy lives. I get that, but you should take the time to take a look at people's issues or contributions. Keep in mind that they are also investing their time in helping you to make your library better. So take the time to review their pull requests, their issues, and give them feedback, even if the issue is not the priority at the moment. I personally really appreciate when someone tells me, this is not going to be implemented soon. Even more if they provide me with a workaround. But the thing is that with this information, I can move forward. So that's why it's really important. Finally, you have to give the contributors the recognition they deserve. You need to let them know if they are doing great, right? They need to feel appreciated by you. What is a better way to engage developers with your library than make them feel part of it? So start now, revisit your repositories, and do your part to create a healthy and constructive community. Let's jump to my tip number 3. Build a wide variety of samples. If for whatever reason you can't expose your library in a public repository, maybe you can open source your samples. This is a very good opportunity to show everyone how your library works. It also gives you a chance to exercise your library, to see how it feels to work with it. Is it easy to get started? What dependencies do you need? What about troubleshooting? This is important input that you can take right away by creating samples. Samples are a very effective way of documentation because you can easily show how your library solves the most common scenarios. But be careful to not overcomplicate them. You have to find a good balance. If you feel that your samples are too big or cover too many aspects, consider splitting them into 2 or more simple ones. They have to illustrate simple use cases so people can easily follow them and maybe start building their applications from there. Another important point about sample is that you have to keep them up to date, right? They require work. So they have to be in sync with your latest product's version. For example, if you're adding a new feature or maybe you are fixing a bug, it might require you to create new samples or update existing ones. It is the same if you are deprecating functionality. The thing is that if you're planning to release a new version, make sure to include updating samples in your roadmap. Developers really appreciate having working applications that are easy to configure, to build, and run. They can use them to test something really quick, or even adapt them and start building their applications from there. When I point developers to our samples, I perceive how much they love to have that option. And also, as a developer, I personally love to explore and experiment with sample projects because it's really time saving. Um, they're in a very effective way to learn quickly, not only for first timers, but also for everyone to experiment with things faster. You can see how building samples can be a very practical way to exercise and document your product, but they are not always sufficient. And you have to consider providing other documentation styles to support different situations that developers might face. So my next tip is provide a wide variety of documentation. Imagine yourself using a library for the first time. What information is crucial for you to get started quickly? How much time are you willing to spend to get started until you get rid of that product forever? Now, imagine you have a considerable experience working with the basics of the library, but now you need to implement a complex use case in your application. Where would you look for information? What about if you get stuck? Where can you go to ask for help? You need to identify all the cases that motivate developers to find something in your documentation. And you need to make sure you have the proper information and communication channels for all of them. So let's do this exercise. Let's try to identify all the possible actors and scenarios. You will probably have developers that are researching different available libraries to solve a particular aspect in their applications and need to know what exactly they can do with your product. Can your product help them? You will also have first timers that want to install the library for the first time and run a hello world example to make sure everything is working as expected. Then you will have advanced developers that know the basics of your library very well, but now they need to implement that super complicated use case. And of course, everyone at some point will try to find how to implement the common use cases, how to troubleshoot issues, or where to ask for help if they get stuck. Once you have identified all these situations, you need to think about what is the best way to provide information for each case. For example, if you have a public repository, you can include what developers can do with your library and the installation steps in the README file. Also, you can add a usage guide to show how to implement the most trivial scenarios. But your README um, shouldn't be too long, right? Because you can find other ways to get further information. In addition to this, you can supply a documentation site with guides to cover the most frequent use cases with step-by-step instructions. Also, if it's applicable, you can provide an API reference where developers can read more technical and detailed documentation about the public interface of your product. There are some tools available out there that already generates this documentation in different formats for you. So you can definitely take advantage of those tools. Another effective way is blogging because it can help developers to learn about your library and explore what they can do. And also, it is a very good chance for you to keep enhancing your writing skills. Your blog is a good opportunity to have a more informal communication and to show how your library works with other popular frameworks and tools. Also, you can talk about recommended practices or share anything that you think will be interesting or useful for your community. Blog comments can engender excellent discussions and even helps you to surface bugs in your code or maybe missing notes in your documentation. But even with all these resources, blogging, a documentation site, an API reference, samples, even with all of these resources, developers might not find the answers they are looking for in the documentation. That's why ideally you should provide a space to communicate with them directly. And why not facilitate and encourage um, to exchange ideas in your community? You can use tools like GitHub, Slack, or maybe a developer forum to give them the opportunity to reach out, to interact, and to ask for help. Make sure that all these communication channels and the purpose of each one is available for everywhere, maybe in your README file, because this is super helpful information. I guess at this point, you can realize how important communication is and the variety of communication styles you should consider to target the different actors of your library. Now, let's jump to my last tip, which also talks about communication. So, communicate the impact of your releases with a clear versioning strategy. I am super impressed how much you can inform with just a few numbers and labels. But all of that makes sense if you have a clear versioning strategy. How can developers determine quickly if it is safe to update to the latest version? How do you inform quickly that your release includes new features and bug fixes that don't break backwards compatibility? What if they do? There are different strategies you can use to version your library. The most widely adopted nowadays is semantic versioning, which is a very effective way to communicate changes in your product. For those who are not familiar with semantic versioning, I'm going to explain this super briefly. Each version tag in semantic versioning consists of three numbers. They are called major, minor, and patch, and they are separated by a period. For example, 1.2.3, where 1 is a major, 2 is a minor, and 3 is a patch. An increment in the patch number indicates that the new version contains bug fixes, documentation updates, or any change that doesn't affect the public API. On the other hand, changes in the minor number indicate that the new version contains new features or changes that are backwards compatible, and developers updating to this version won't need to change the way they use the library. Finally, an increase in the major number indicates that those changes are not backwards compatible and that developers will have to make updates in their code that depends on this library. Major versions are usually accompanied by a migration guide or any sort of documentation that helps developers in the process of updating their code to your new library version. As I mentioned, this is not the only strategy you can use. You can actually tailor this one to adapt to your project needs. The key point here is that it is very important to have a formal specification with clear and simple rules. Otherwise, numbers and labels are useless. As you can imagine, version formatting is not enough. In addition to choosing, implementing, and communicating your versioning strategy, you have to provide a changelog. And you have to keep it up to date with any relevant changes that are being introduced to your library, such as bug fixes or new features, anything relevant. There are a few formats already available out there that you can follow, but remember, choose the one that meets your needs because you are responsible for maintaining it. So I guess at this point you have a sense of the effort involved here. It takes a community to deliver a library and also a great experience. It requires a considerable amount of work. Not only do you have to work hard to build a functional and useful developer library, but you also have to work hard to create a community of developers who are using that tool. Building that community requires much more work than just writing code. It involves creating and enforcing a safe space for everyone to contribute, thinking and providing alternatives that will help them during different stages of their applications. This is documentation, blog tutorials, samples, support, but this effort is totally worth it. You are engendering a community with a common goal: make your product better. During this journey, you will be improving your communication skills, and also you will be becoming a better developer. You will learn from others, and others will learn from you. Of course, there are so many aspects that you should consider if you are a library author, some more technical than others. For example, type of licenses, testing, CI, etc. These tips are just the tip of the iceberg. But I hope you find these tips useful. And if you are not a library author, I hope you have a sense of how much work is involved in maintaining a product. So be mindful and respectful with project maintainers, because they are doing their best to help you to succeed. Finally, I'm super curious to learn about what aspects you think are fundamental for a great developer experience. So feel free to reach out. You have my contact information on this slide. So super excited to learn from you. Okay, Fox, this is all I have for you today. I really hope you enjoyed this talk, and stay tuned for other great talks today. Thank you very much.